my apologies. I am not going to really talk about biomolecular condensate. I'll definitely talk about the condensates, and towards the end, maybe I'll try to say that the model that we have developed in the context of some other synthetic polymers can very well be applied to the biopolymers. That's the argument that I will try to convince you towards the end of the talk. So I'm going to talk about the flexible active polymer, and to give you a idea of active systems. So far we have talked about this condensation formation, this coil to globule transition in the context of electrostatics most of the time. We had polymers which were mostly charged, and the charge was playing a very crucial role in forming these transitions from the coil to globule state. That is what we have seen so far in many talks. But I'll try to convey to you that charge is definitely one way of forming the condensate, but there are other phenomena, there are other forces that can also be very relevant in forming these kind of globulization of the polymer. Right. So before going to the polymer, what are the active systems? Active systems are something which has some internal agents to generate motion, to generate some mechanical work by consuming the energy which is there in the environment. They don't need any external forces for it to move or to perform certain work. They have some internal mechanisms by which they can perform the mechanical motions or self-propulsion. Bacteria is one example for that. The natural motors that we have at the nanoscales are other examples of that. And we have examples at different length scales for the active systems. Birds, humans, fishes, all of them are active systems. So starting from nanometer all the way till our scale, we have active systems present in it. And the interesting part of these active systems are they exhibit a very fascinating collective motion. So you can see this flocking of birds, fishing, the school fishes, the way humans behave in a herd, the way bacteria swarms in collection. These are very fascinating collective behavior which comes in these active systems automatically, irrespective of the length scales in which they are. Right. So active agents are the agents which are employing some energy from the environment and giving some forces to the system, right? This is one example in nature, which is active polymer, which can be classified as active polymer. And what do we mean by active polymers? So we have chromatin. Chromatin has all these enzymes, proteins, which are doing a lot of different types of work, and therefore they're giving some forces locally, some forces to these polymer, and hence it makes it an active polymer. And it is shown by these people that these active processes are different at different parts of the chromatin. For example, euchromatin, which is more open, has more activity than heterochromatin, which is more closed, right? And also they have very well showed that these active processes, when they are correlated, so if you have multiple active processes happening in the chromatin, right? By active processes, I mean these enzymes, these transcription factors, they're all working on the enzymes at different locations, but if they are correlated, in the way they are working on, this can actually mediate some effective attraction between the polymer, and that correlated activity can also lead to some sort of a compartmentalization in the active polymer. So I am trying to say that these active processes, these active forces which are there locally at different on the polymer can also give rise to some sort of a condensation by this effective attraction. Okay. But that's not what I'm trying to talk about right now. I'm going to talk to you about the active polymer, which are synthetic active polymer, and we'll try to take it from here to the natural active polymer also. Now, what kind of synthetic active particle that I'm talking about? I'm talking about this kind of Janus particle, which has two faces. You can see there's a red face and a blue face, and they are chemically very different from each other, right? The red face, which is platinum coated on a silica sphere, which is the complete sphere, carries out a reaction on just one side of the Janus, and because of this reaction, what happens is there's a gradient which is formed of the product or the fuel, whatever you want to say, and that gradient somehow propels this Janus particle in a particular direction, right? So this is a particle which does not require any external forces for it to move. It has the mechanism, right? It has some mechanism by which it creates the gradient for itself to move. Right? Therefore, it's an active particle, it's a self-propelled particle, right? Now, if I have multiple of them, right? And this has been characterized well in the literature, the single active particles. Now, if there are multiple of them and if we stitch them together by some means, okay, there are different means by which people have stitched these active particles, they form these polymers, right? And it's been shown that these polymers exhibit very fascinating, definitely the motion. If you stick them like this, leave them, these ring polymers, they will show rotational motion. The linear one will show directional motion. If you clamp them, they will beat like cilia, and so on and so forth. So this is something which is very fascinating from the perspective of synthesizing something which is natural also. Okay. So this is one of my main motivations to satisfy my model. But then I would just like to give you a glimpse of what other type of active polymers are there. Synthetic active polymers are there, which is in the literature. You can also see these. These are the polymers, passive polymers, which are in the active bath. And they show very nice enhancement in their dynamics. And similarly, this is again ice templating of, you have these active particles which are stitched by some other mechanism, and that they also show a very enhanced diffusion and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, to understand these stitched Janus particle, okay, there have been different models. So, to understand this active polymer, there are different types of models which are there in the literature. One model which is called active Brownian polymer, where what you have is a polymer chain, okay, and these activity, when I say activity, it means some sort of forcing, right, which is there. The origin of forces could be very different for different systems, but you have some forces, and these are represented by these these red arrows or these red balls here, and they are completely Brownian. That means the monomer of the polymers will have forces in all the directions, right, and that's why they are called active Brownian polymer. And they exhibit this kind of the reduction in Rg and then the swelling behavior. So, non-monotonicity in the Rg is observed for this kind of active Brownian polymer. There's another class of active polymer which people talk about in literature, which is called polar active filament. Right? These are the filament where you have forces on these monomers, but they are not Brownian anymore. Rather, what you have is the forces which are directed along the backbone. So, if I'm sitting on this monomer will have a force along this direction. This monomer will have force along this direction. So, there is a force which is polar in nature along the backbone of the polymer, and this is why they are called polar active filament, right? And this has some relevance in the biology. I'll come back to that towards the end of the talk. And what these people have shown, that if you have such polar active polymer, then depending on the activity, which is described by this number called Peclet number, larger is the Peclet number, more is the activity. Depending on what Peclet number you are working on, as you increase the activity, the polymer shows a coil to globule transition. So, it condenses because of this polar activity only. These are all neutral polymer. There is nothing else except these activities which I am talking about, except these local forces which I am talking about. Okay. Now, these model, which is ADPO or these polar active polymer, is sufficient to talk about these Janus chains that I had showed you in the beginning, right? So, these Janus chains are the chains where you have each chemically active particles which are stitched to each other, and we don't know what kind of forces are actually present there, whether it's an active Brownian, whether it will fall under the category of active Brownian or the polar, we don't know that, right? So, therefore, we came up with a more explicit model to talk about these Janus chains, right? So, these are the polymers, which is the Janus particles which are attached to each other. So, you can see these dimers that I have here are the Janus particles which are attached to each other by some means, by some potentials, right? So, individually, if I look at each of these Janus, you have a catalytic site where the reaction goes on. A fuel is getting converted to the product, right? A is getting converted to B. So, there is a gradient of the product that I am showing here, which is formed across each Janus particle, right? And therefore, because these are the metal where I have the explicit solvent into it, right? Therefore, I can also see what is happening to the flow around the particle, and you see there is a flow of the solvent around the particle, which we can really characterize very well, right? Now, if I have multiple of these Janus particles stitched together, what is going to happen is the question that we are going to ask, right? One thing which is very clear is for individual genus particle, we have a gradient which is set up, and therefore this gradient will give a local force to each of these genus particles, right? So each of these active particles is going to have a local force which is represented by these black arrows. But remember, these are chemical gradient that can diffuse across, right? So therefore, and this is the gradient of same B particle. Every genus will have the same reaction which is going on, right? Therefore, a genus which is sitting somewhere here will also sense the gradient generated by this, right? So overall, it's not a polar active polymer. Rather, it is a polymer where it has some local forces because of the catalytic, this catalytic site present next to it, and also this long range forces, right? Because of all other genus particles present into it, right? So I have now the forcing, which can be decomposed into two parts, the local force and the global force, and then we will try to see what is happening because of these forcing. So basically what is happening is some reaction on one side, right? And there are multiple sites where the reaction is happening, and because of this reaction, forces are getting generated, right? And forces are of two types. One is the local forces generated because of its own reaction, and the long range force generated because of all others, right? Now, if I have something like this, and I characterize this, or we do a explicit solvent simulation, I'll tell you why we are emphasizing that also here, okay? And we see what is the structure that we found. The first thing that we are going to talk about, the structure. So when we have the passive polymer, you see, as the time evolves, there's nothing much happens in the, as far as the structural transition is concerned. The polymer stays in a nice, because of flexible polymer, it is going to stay in the coiled state all the time. But the moment we have activity, the polymer has this coil to globule transition. So it condenses this activity that it has, it condenses the polymer into a globule, right? And then we went ahead and talked about what kind of globule it is, how do we characterize, and of course to characterize the globule, the easiest thing is to talk about the radius of gyration. And you see this is the radius of gyration. As we increase the Peclet, which is the activity on the system, it systematically goes to a lower and lower value of the Rg. That means it systematically condenses to a globule state as I am increasing the Rg, right? The next thing that one would talk about in such cases, that how compact these globules are. When you are increasing the activity, what is happening to the Fleury exponent, which tells you how compact these globules are, right? So in the coiled state, if you talk about how do we get the Fleury exponent, we get the Fleury exponent by talking about how Rg scales with the number of monomers, right? For a passive system, it is known that it will scale as roughly 0.6, right? And as you go to a completely globuled state, it is going to scale as 0.33, right? So we see a very systematic change from the passive polymer, which is Peclet 1 in this particular case, which is 0.6, towards 0.33, which is a complete globulization. So as I increase the activity on the polymer, right, I am actually going from a coil to a globule state transition, and that transition is very gradual, and we can talk about how this Fleury exponent changes with the Peclet number. Interestingly, though our model is very different from the polar active model that I showed you, but the scaling that we see for the Fleury exponent as a function of Peclet number is very similar to what they have also observed. I'll come to the reason for that also in a moment, right? So what we have seen so far is by having these activities. Now remember, this is a simulation, this is a model where I have the explicit solvent, therefore my range for n that I can go to is limited by my computation, right? Therefore I would like to talk about this kind of polymer for a long range. If I have, so I'm talking about this coil to globule transition for a smaller polymer. Now the question is, if I go to a very long polymer, will we still have the coil to globule transition, or will not have? The length of the monomer plays an important role in this particular kind of activity or not, right? But then the problem is the explicit solvent simulation, and therefore we actually now map our explicit solvent simulation to an implicit solvent simulation. It gives me two advantages. The first advantage is I can definitely go to a very long polymer size and see what extra it brings in. Secondly, I can characterize the effect of the hydrodynamics, right? In my first simulation is where I had the explicit solvent, therefore I had the explicit hydrodynamics. Hydrodynamics is flow, what is happening because of the flow, right? Now I don't have it, so I will actually be able to characterize that what is it that the hydrodynamics is bringing to the condensation. Whether the condensation will happen or will not happen, it is because of the hydrodynamics and so on and so forth, right? So to do that mapping, we need to figure out the forces, right? If I want to map model A to model 2 different simulation method and I want to compare them, I need to have the parameters right, right? To get that parameter right, we need to really talk about the forces which was, what is the origin of the activity in the previous case, right? I told you the chemical gradient, right? Which was generated by the chemical reaction in all the genus is the reason for the activity. That is the reason for the forces, right? That is what we call as a diffuser phoretic force. A phoretic force because of the concentration gradient, therefore diffuser phoretic force, right? So how do I model these diffuser phoretic force in this particular case of implicit solvent? Explicit solvent, I can actually carry out the reaction. Right? We had the reaction, that reaction will diffuse the solvent particle, everything is inbuilt into it. Now, if I want to bring out this diffuser phoretic forces, which is same as what we had in the explicit solvent, I need to get this thing right, right? And to do that, we employ this kind of force, which depends on the chemical concentration gradient. C is the concentration of the product particle, right? And then that depends on, so each of these source particle, right, or the catalytic particle will be the center for the chemical generation, right? And therefore, each of these phoretic particle will get a force, right, which will be dependent on the concentration gradient generated by all the sum of all these things, which will come here. And then I have a parameter alpha here to play with, which I will play with and actually match these two simulation method accurately to be able to say anything about the hydrodynamic effect very, very, very concretely, right? And we do that. We talk about the Peclet number. So basically what we would like to do is we would like to get the same Peclet number from both the simulations. To do that, we have to talk about the translational velocity and rotational diffusion coefficient of the polymer, right? We do that, we see what is the value of alpha C, where we have the exact matching from HI minus simulations and HI plus simulations. So I have a model where there is no hydrodynamics, I have a model where there is hydrodynamics. I tune these parameters to get exact matching of V and exact matching of dr, and therefore whenever I say that Peclet 4 for model A is the same Peclet that I am talking about in the model B, and therefore whatever I will get is going to be same, and the extra effect that I am going to have is due to the hydrodynamics that I can say very, very, very confidently, right? So what is it that hydrodynamics is bringing to me? So you see that this is for the passive polymer, this is for the active polymer. You see, for both these cases, let's talk about the active polymer because of the time. So if I see this active polymer, this is something, the blue curve is something which is HI minus, right? And the red curve is something which is HI plus. HI plus is something that I had already shown you. So you see red curve to red curve here. When you increase the activity from, when you go from passive to active, there is a condensation. Rg goes from roughly 15 to 5. So there is a condensation, which is what I showed you, right? And that condensation also happens in the implicit solvent simulation technique, but now the compactness that you have for the HI minus case is something which is even more than the HI plus case, which is also expected, right? When you will have hydrodynamics, when you will have the solvent in between, it is going to swell the polymer slightly more than what it is going to be without the solvent in between, right? And therefore, we show that these are something, with both of these models is something which is going to show us the condensation, the coil to globule transition. The difference in that, in the structure of that, is due to the solvent present in this. So you can see this is more open structure, but this is much more collapsed structure. But that's not what I started with. So this is one of the agenda points, that what is it that hydrodynamics is doing. So we saw that hydrodynamics is actually, and of course the dynamics part is something which I am not talking about, is also getting altered a bit. But at the end of the day, we are getting the coil to globule transition in both these cases with subtle differences. The next question that I had asked in the beginning is, what will happen if I have the long polymer, which I could not access with the explicit solvent, right? So you can see this again, the red ones are with the hydrodynamics, the blue ones are without hydrodynamics. I can access large N. Interestingly, when I go to large N, we see a non-monotonic behavior of Rg with N. That's very interesting. You see, of course, the The 2 points to note here is passive will have a scaling of 0.6, but when I go to active case, the scaling decreases from 0.6 to roughly 0.3. That shows a globule formation from a open state to a closed state formation. That's one thing. The second thing, important thing to notice is the RG increases, then decreases, and then again increases with an exponent, which is roughly 0.33 again. Now the question is why this is, and why do we have a non-monotonicity? Why don't we have point? So we have 0.33 here, 0.33 here, but in between there is a dip in RG, right? And we feel that this is due to the competition between the activity and entropy. So when you increase the size of the polymer, the entropy of the system increases. At the same time, when I'm increasing the size of the polymer, number of active sites are also increasing, right? So at long time, this gets a equilibrium, but in between, where the entropy is, so the active forces dominates the entropy, you get more collapsed than the short time and the long time. Right? That's the reason for non-monotonic behavior that we observe in this particular case, which we couldn't have done with the explicit solvent simulation. Now again, coming back to the same, in the initial thing which I told you in the beginning, that these polymers, so I'm going to go to the ring a bit, but imagine the same thing is going to happen to the linear polymer. Remember, I said we have two types of phases in these chain of Janus. A local phase because of the catalyst, because of the chemical activity of the adjacent particle, and a long range force, a global force, right? Which I could not really differentiate in the previous simulations, right? In the previous work of explicit solvent. Now I have this model where I can actually differentiate these two forces very well and try to figure out what is it which is important at what length scales, right? Is it that the local force which is important, or it's the global force which is important in the condensation of the polymer, right? So polymer is going from coiled state to a globule state. There are two types of forces, the local force and the long range force. Which of these two dominates when? Is it one of them always dominate or the other one dominates? So these are the questions that we start asking now. So we have now these two forces explicitly written, right? And I can control these forces because I have now this implicit solvent completely nicely mapped to the previous one, right? And then I go ahead and talk about these. Okay, how much time I have? Oh my God. Okay, so that's cruel. Let me just go back here. Okay. So you see here, we have this orange curve where we have both these forces. In fact, in all of them, we have both these forces present. The local force, which is PT, and a global force, which is PR. So we see that there is a non-monotonic behavior that we see for because of the presence of both of them. Now the question was, this non-monotonic behavior that we observe is because of which force, right? And therefore now we simulated this polymer for the PT local force separately and the global force separately. What we see is this non-monotonic behavior that we observe is just because of the local force, not because of the global force, which is not very intuitive, right? Intuitively, you will think that it's the global force which is trying to bring things together, which has to dominate, right? But that's not what we see. In fact, the next slide is something that's showing us the same thing, that for a long polymer and even for the short polymer, it's the local force that dominates, and that is the reason for it to condense, not the global force, right? And the question is why? Why would I think that local force is something which is going to bring the monomers together and condense it? The answer to that lies in the bond correlation. If you talk about that, if you look at the bond correlation along the polymer, you will see a hairpin sort of structure forming when you have the local forces. That doesn't form when you have the global forces. So what happens is, first of all, when you have both these forces present, the local force, the local tangential force, which is important for the condensation. And why does that happen? Because these kind of local hairpin-like structure, multiple hairpin-like structure that forms, and that is what gives rise to this kind of condensation. Okay, because of lack of time, I'll skip this, and just the last part that I wanted to talk to you about is Now that we have understood that these local forces are important in condensation, so let's forget about the global forces and try to see what is the effect of these local forces. If I change the density of these local forces, density of these motors, what is it that it does? So when we change the density of the motor, we see a systematic change in the conformation. When you have multiple motors, it goes to a condensed state. The moment you decrease the number of motor, it goes to an open state. And that how much it is going to go to an open state will also depend on what Peclet we are talking about. For a smaller Peclet, even a small number of motors is sufficient to make it take it to the collapse state. Not only that, self-similarity is lost and all that, but this is one last slide which I wanted to emphasize. Not only how many motors, but where they are positioned as extremely important, right? So we're talking about now the Taylor phases, which is the kind of phases you can think about in the Martin also, simple phase sliding type of protein which is recruited, which is going to give a local forces, right? Where those motors are, how many of them are extremely important. If I have a uniform distribution, this is the solid curve that you see here. If I have the same number density of motor, and a uniform distribution, it shows an open state, but the moment I make the distribution of the motor random with the same motor density, it goes to a very mixed state. It's a plethora of conformation that it takes. Not only that, where the head motor is lying, right? The first motor, first parent motor, where does it lie is also extremely important. You see, here the first motor lies actually at the head, but here the first motor lies after 4-5 beats, right? So the moment you shift the leader to the back, the passive ones dominates and they start disorienting the whole thing, and it goes to a collapse state. So from a very nice open state to a collapse state, but just by shifting the motor position by 3 or 4 is sufficient to take it to do these transition. Right. So with that, maybe in the interest of time, I'll stop here and thank all the students who have done. The major part of this was actually done by Sandeep and Surabhi. And of course, this is taken up by these two kids right now. So thank you all.